Welcome to LOA Today. I'm Walt Jason.
I've been doing this podcast since September of 2012, and boy, are my lips tired.
This is your daily dose of happy. We are so happy you decided to join us today. And Jody Lynn is traveling this week and is going to be back in a week or so. But in the meantime, as everyone knows, Jody Lynn lives in Alberta, Canada, and so she's my Canada contingent. And I am still represented from Canada today because my guest is also Canadian. Her name is Johnson. She's a registered nurse. She has a book coming out in the next, I guess it's about 6-7 weeks, something like that, called Nursing Intuition. And we're going to learn all about that. But Jen, first of all, welcome to the program. How you doing?
I'm doing so well. Thank you so much for having me, Walt.
Glad to have you. So, all right, as usual, there's a story behind where you got to right now. And that's like where we always want to start. We want to find out what the story is that led up to this. So tell us a story.
The story is, ended up starting university as actually a biology major due to the double cohort ending in Canada. I was the younger half of the double cohort. So unless you had 90s to 100% grade average, you weren't getting in anywhere in Southern Ontario. So Lakehead University accepted me and was the only one to accept me. So ended up flying up there, sight unseen. It's Thunder Bay. It's cold. It's a whole other thing. And so started in biology, got through a year, got into the second year, ended up failing my first half of organic chemistry. And I'd never failed anything before. And at the time it seemed like, oh man, I'm now a year behind. What am I going to do? And in talking to some girlfriends, one of whom was in a nursing program, she had kind of said like, hey, like, why don't you look at this? And we'd always had gone through her nursing textbooks and things. I'm like, okay, this is cool. This is what I want. So ended up, thankfully, Lakehead had a 3-year compressed nursing program. So I was able to do my degree in 3 years instead of 4. Got out, ended up meeting my now husband just before I'd graduated. So his little town, which was like less than 5,000 people, Northern Ontario, like even more north than Thunder Bay. And started nursing there, and it was my introduction to emergency nursing. There was only one nurse for the emergency department, one nurse and 2 registered practical nurses for the floor, which is about 14 beds or so. And it was eye-opening. You get started, you're so excited and you're so new, and you're just like, oh, nursing is not what they kind of led me to believe, getting through school. So ended up doing 5 years there, horrifically bullied. At that point had never been so depressed. Ended up deciding to be the most educated, or trying to be the most educated nurse to ever leave there. And so moved down south, closer to my family, got started in a very large stroke center. And the change between the two dynamics was night and day. And ended up having so much fun and meeting people who I'm still in touch with today, and lifelong friendships that you can't. I don't think I could even get away from these people if I wanted to. It's the trauma bond is strong in this one. So we go back and forth, and I've moved around since then. I've tried a pediatric emergency. I've tried the trauma center. Ended up currently still at the bedside part-time, and ended up in a small-ish emerge, like not really small and not really big. And it's been 5 years, and I've just had a wonderful time short of COVID. And working and living through all of that. So it's been a long time. So it's been 16 years total, and still love emergency medicine, still love nursing. My relationship has changed with it just a little bit, where, you're starting to realize I can't do it all. I can't staff every shift personally. I can't work myself into the ground. So bringing it back a little bit, where I'm stepping back a bit, focusing now on my book and the journals that I've created to try and help newer grads grow through their own shifts as they kind of get started, and have kind of been on a little bit of a mission to bring a little bit of love back to nursing, because man, did we ever lose it during COVID. So just trying to do my best with what I've got and where I am and where I'm at, and just hoping that, if my book or my message helps one person know that they're not only not alone, but we've all been there and we're right here for you. And, if you need a shoulder, I'm personally here. So, whatever you need to get through the day, to get to the next, and grow and learn and thrive, and become the nurse you were meant to be, is kind of my little, I'm on my hill. I'm on my little soapbox, and I'm going for it.
I can tell. Yeah. Good for you.
So just coming at it from a couple of different angles, seeing what's going on, what's happening out in the world, going to a couple of conferences, getting geared up for those. I am absolutely petrified of what's happening, because there are a lot of things that are happening very, very quickly, and not even sure how I got into some of these positions, but am loving where this could go, and how much help this could bring people. So I'm going to be uncomfortable, and I'm just going to go for it. If I fall on my face, I hope there's a very large audience, because it's going to be hilarious.
There are a few points in your story there that I wanted to bring up. The first one, when you made mention of having failed organic chemistry, I actually roomed with pre-med students.
No.
Who also went through the organic chemistry nightmares. I have to admit, looking back on that time, I asked myself, I know that they still, put you through it if you're going to go to med school or nursing school or whatever, but I've often asked myself, why? Because we now live in an era where literally all the information is available at your fingertips. So why do you have to memorize all that? That's the part I don't quite get. And I don't think they have a good answer for that one.
Truly, so organic chemistry wasn't part of at least the nursing half of things. That was my biology degree.
Right.
But that was a rude awakening for sure. And actually, once I had gotten accepted into nursing school, I was in kind of the Boralaskan, which is this big open area. And I just, I ended up running into the teacher. And we're both standing in line for Tim Hortons. We're just waiting. And I'm like, I got to say something. I can't not say something. And so I'm like, hi, sorry. I know that you don't remember me, because there was easily 300 kids in that class, but I need you to understand you failed me. And you kind of see her face kind of go, uh-oh, which way is this going to go? And I said, thank you. Thank you for failing me, because had you not, I would have just trudged on. I would have pushed through. I would have gotten my biology degree, never finding nursing, potentially. And I need you to know that this was a huge kind of waypoint for me. And I need you to know that thank you for failing me. It sounds horrific, but you doing that changed a lot, and you probably felt awful doing it, but thank you. And
I hear you. Yeah.
Oh yeah. It's one of those weird things where I'm sure she didn't see that coming, but it's just, me personally, when people come into your life, good or bad or otherwise, and you find the silver lining in it, my personal preference is to just say thank you regardless. Sometimes
not a bad policy. That's a very effective policy, actually.
Sometimes I'm a little bit more PC, or I'm having to be more PC than I'd like. But I just, regardless, if you've had an impact on me, you know it regardless, whether or not I'm super upset or not, to just get it going and say hey.
Well, you also made mention of the fact that you've actually referenced it a couple of times. You have a tendency to push through. You want to wear all the hats. You want to be the person who gets everything done. My response to that was, welcome to the world of entrepreneurship, because that's exactly what that's.
And again, it's a whole nother level of, pushing through it and just going with it, because nothing in nursing school, there's so many things that pop up in healthcare where the joke is, well, you didn't learn that in nursing school. And now with entrepreneurship, it's like, how do I make the website work? How do I get a business email? How do I do my taxes? How do I do all these things? Social media and branding and kind of all of these quirky little corners of the world that I have no knowledge of. And it's been interesting, to say the least, to try and kind of get a handle on what the heck's going on.
Well, the hardest part with dealing with this kind of thing is learning the power of delegation.
Yes.
Learning not to try to do it all yourself, learning to pass it off as off. In fact, after a while, you do get to the point where you actually recognize the importance of delegating, to the point where you want to find somebody to delegate everything to.
Yeah.
Which is also known as mental health, by the way.
100%. Sometimes I take a step back and I go, okay, what's my hourly worth? Because being a bedside nurse, I can quantify my hourly worth as designated by, where I'm working currently. But based on my hourly worth, it's like, okay, how many hours would it take me to figure out how in the world to get the Google email to talk to the website and like back and forth, or change a C name on the website to get everything to talk together. It's going to take me a lot of hours, and it's probably something that I'm not really able to wrap my head around. So I'm going to defer to the experts, and 100%, this is what you're here for. This is your worth. I appreciate you. I validate you. I need this.
The way I like to think of it is that if I think about people who run large corporations, who are at the very, very top, the CEOs, they don't know how to do any of the work.
Which
they don't
is
know
always...
how to do, they can't. It's impossible for them because they're such large corporations. There's so many different things going on. There's no way they could know how to do it all. So in a sense, they're kind of forced to delegate because they really have no other choice in the matter.
Well, and they're being pulled, again, I can only imagine you're being pulled in so many directions, and have who am I answering to, and how many angles of answers am I answering, and people am I answering to, and just kind of trying to figure out, am I trying to stay put? Am I still trying to grow? Is this where my end goal is? Am I going to be pushed out and have to start all over again? I don't know. Would I love to take any and all CEOs, healthcare CEOs willing, onto a 12-hour night shift in the middle of a full moon in the middle of winter? Absolutely. On a holiday weekend, Christmas. No, Christmas, people tend to stay away. Halloween.
Okay, there's a good one. Yeah.
I personally do not work Halloween. It is the one day a year where it's not technically a holiday. But I believe it is. So, and I've still got young kids, so we still go out and trick or treat. So I refuse to work Halloween, and it's not just for the fun portion for me, but the stories I've heard through the years, I can't even imagine. No, I've never worked Halloween ever. So I have no frame of reference for that.
You know how to say, okay, no here, yes here, but no here. And that's good. You have to know how to do that.
Boundaries have been an interesting little figuring out, how do I just say no? When they're calling for shifts and they're going, oh, we're so short, and oh, your work family. And I'm like, ooh, we're going to stop that there. I love my colleagues. I trust my colleagues implicitly. But no, my family is my family. You calling it a family is kind of a red flag in my books. But it's not up to me personally to staff the department. It's not my personal job. It is not my personal weight to carry. If I can help out, if it's going to be time and a half.
Guilt tripping. I would call that passing.
We've gotten a little bit better. They're more often than not, scheduling is calling out. So you can just see on your phone, oh, it's like the sick line is calling, and you're going like, no, thank you. I'm just not even going to answer. When I do answer and they, oh, can you do XYZ? And you're like, no. Being able to stop and not provide a reason that's also taken years to get to, where it's always been like, oh no, I've got an appointment, or I've got the kids are doing this. I just can't do it. And so they,
I think it's one of those things you have to learn just by kind of beating yourself over the head with it for a while until you finally say, I can't do this anymore.
Yes. It's one of those things where you get to a point where you're absolutely so out of it.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, we were all kind of on the brink with COVID,
Mm-hmm.
or before COVID, and then COVID was just the last little thing to go whoop and just
Mm-hmm.
over the edge to everybody.
Yeah.
Any reserve that anybody had left was absolutely gone. It was just a whole other world.
Now, did that coincide with what you were describing when you made mention of the depression that you went through?
Yeah. So, had an episode during my first 5 years, never medicated, should have been. That was more related to the bullying at the time. The more recent bout was like June, July, August, 2020. And that was a mixture of, COVID happening, sleep deprivation, because I was going to straight nights because we didn't have daycare. And my husband was also essential, so he also had to work. So I worked straight nights. I would stay up all night. Maybe we'd get a 3-hour break, and that was on the really, really good days. Have a nap, come home, be up all day with the kids, and they were 4, 5, 6 at the time, and stay up all day with them. My husband would come home at 5. I would try to get a nap for an hour before going back in and staying up and coming and like just doing it day after day for weeks. While also, you're wondering, am I going to make it through this? Am I going to survive? Am I going to get sick? Am I going to be on a ventilator? And
that raises an interesting question for me. And it's one that I've addressed a number of different ways with different guests from a wide range of backgrounds. But I want to ask you about it because specifically of your background of having gone through it from that perspective. I mean, you were kind of on the front line. From that perspective, I mean, from your medical background, the power of mindset of the placebo and the nocebo and so forth and how all that plays out. You guys were dealing with that in your own mental health day by day, not let alone what you were trying to do with what your patients were dealing with. You were trying to deal with it within your own frame of mind, within your own mental health. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. So when you've got attorneys coming forward and volunteering to do everybody's wills for free, it's really hard not to further take home the message that I'm not going to survive this. Nobody expects me to survive this.
Mm-hmm.
Good on the attorneys for coming forward and volunteering and getting people's things in order, because that is a huge thing. And a lot of people my age don't have things in order already. But just that fear of, am I going to catch something? Am I going to be the one to make my children sick? Am I going to be the one to give it to my family? Am I going to be the one to spread it? Am I, it was very, not egotistical, but just very ego-centered, where everything revolved around me because I was petrified. I was less worried about getting sick and being ill myself. It was all about, what if I make somebody sick? What if I pass this on? What if somebody dies because of what I did or didn't do? It was just one of those things where, it was a moment by moment, just trying to get through the shift.
Mm-hmm.
The only slight benefit was not only were we finally getting recognized for doing what we do, and people were finally very overly appreciative, and it was a little disconcerting because it's like, normally I'm used to the public literally spitting in my face and calling me every name in the book in every language, to being, you're a hero, you're wonderful, you're all these things, and you're going like, whoa, this is not.
Is this the same population from 3 years ago?
3 days ago.
3 days ago, yeah.
Days ago.
Yeah.
What is going on?
Mm-hmm.
So, so that kind of the stability of just being able to anticipate the public, which is a very large job of the ER, that's gone topsy-turvy. And you're having...
I want to stand with that point for a minute, because that's a really interesting point. Not only did you experience it coming from pre-COVID into the COVID era, but I imagine you also experienced it leaving once the COVID pandemic was considered over officially about a year and a quarter ago. right? And we're putting air quotes for people because 97% of the listeners are listener only. They can't see the video, so we have to tell them these things. But it's theoretically over. And what happened to that experience? Did the experience continue? Did it shift back to the way it used to be?
It did. It came back to normal. I routinely talk about the way the public treats the ER is you're kind of in an abusive relationship with the public where the ER is the victim. And so you kind of expect that people are going to be upset. They're going to be worried. They're going to be stressed out. They're going to be in pain. They're not going to know what's happening. And all those things combined never really let somebody who's normally quite even keeled act appropriately. So, we can we can explain away a lot of these behaviors with what's going on in the moment. And thankfully, the verbal abuse, you're so used to that you just it hits you, and somebody else who's new, it's going like, oh my God, are you okay? And you're like, what just happened? Nothing just happened. No, that was nothing. Don't worry about that. That was fine.
Which is a heck of a thing to say when you really think about it.
Which is so wrong on so many levels. But
Yeah.
when you're just so used to anticipating that people are going to be nasty to you,
it says a lot about what your state of mind is.
Oh yeah. Yeah. So you just kind of, you go back and forth and you're like, this is fine. They're swearing a little bit. So do I. They're upset. Again, if I was in their position, I would be a little bit upset too. So it kind of reminds you to be, bringing people into the loop of what's coming in. So it's like, okay, so no, I can't give you anything for pain, anything more than usually Tylenol and Advil. No, I don't know how long the doctor's going to take to see you. No, I don't know what's wrong. But what I do know is I do know that I can start an IV. I do know that I can get blood work started so that by the time the doctor actually sees you, he or she already has answers in their hand. Right. I can go talk to my doc to see, what kind of things are going on. I can take a look at the department to see what else is happening. I can kind of feel out, I can tell you how many people are ahead of you, but I'm also going to tell you that could change in an instant,
Sure.
depending on what comes in through the door.
Welcome to the dynamic aspect of a hospital.
Yes. So it's, I expect the doc might be here within an hour or two. But what I do know for sure, your blood work is going to take anywhere from 45 minutes to an hour. Because of some of the blood work we're running, we are going to be repeating that in roughly 3 hours time. So you will be here for roughly 4 hours total from when we start taking the blood work.
That's useful.
Yeah. So at least I'm kind of like, hey, roughly this is what's going on. What do you want to do? Get comfortable, fall asleep if you want to, can I do anything for you right now? Oh, can I have a drink of water? Unfortunately, because you're vomiting, I would hold off because you're sick. I understand that you're feeling very dehydrated and you're not feeling great and you want to just continue to throw up everywhere. Yeah. I'm going to do what I can. I've got little tricks. I can take an alcohol swab and I can put it beside your nose and ask you to take a couple of deep breaths. It's an old recovery room trick where for some reason it cuts the nausea. If I'd continued on with chemistry, maybe I might know how that works. But for right now, try that. It may distract you. And thankfully, I've never nursed in a time where people didn't have portable entertainment units in their hand.
Oh, right.
I cannot imagine nursing when everybody was just staring at the same TV that's running the same news thing over and over and over, and nobody can agree on what to watch kind of thing. And it's hard enough to wait 3-4 hours while being distracted without, so I can't even imagine what it was like back in the day.
Because today we often hear about, and we even talk about complaining about, everybody's glued to their screens, nobody's connected to each other. You're giving a very good reason why that kind of thing is actually helpful. It works. Nice counterbalance,
Yeah. Some people still bring in physical books, and kudos to them for expecting the wait. And usually those people are also the ones who are more than well enough versed in the wait times and what's going on. And so it's the book readers. They're usually very appreciative, oh no, I've got my book and everything's
Mhm.
fine and just let me
Mhm.
know. And I'm like, oh, look at you be
Nice.
all prepared. Like, good on you for being prepared for a long wait. Because really, if you are mentally prepared for a long wait, that is half the battle.
Yeah, sure. It's going to make it a lot easier to get through it, first of all. And second of all, you're going to come through it in a better frame of mind, which is going to make you more treatable at the end.
Yeah.
So both ways you look at it, it's going to come out better.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, I also want to take advantage of the opportunity here and talk about something to see. I want to know what your perspective is on something we talk
Sure.
about a lot. Because once again, you're dealing with situations where they're already sick. They're in an emergency situation. They're actually up against something that potentially is life-threatening or has a very severe chronic aspect to it or something along that line. So it's a very specific way of understanding medicine and of understanding a person's health or lack thereof. But what I want to ask you about is what happens before people get sick. And the reason I want to bring that up is it's not something that, well, first of all, mainstream medicine doesn't really address it anyway.
Yeah.
But even if it did, what it would be addressing would be in many cases stuff that it can't put the double-blind placebo-controlled study on. So I wouldn't want to do it anyway.
Yeah, it's hard, right? So, and thankfully, Canada's a little bit more proactive than reactive a little bit that way. And again, I think it's just the system, how it's set up is people are coming in willy-nilly. You've only been sick for a day. You're coming in, you're being seen, you're being treated, instead of potentially you don't have health insurance. You're putting it off for days and days and days, and then are much sicker later on. So like the push on preventative health, on exercise, and being out in nature, and smoking cessation, and curbing your drinking, and all these things that we know can contribute to poor health later on. Like, we're trying to kind of get ahead of it a little bit, but everybody is so person dependent that it's hard. So, I mean, myself, like, just look at me. I know what I potentially am up against because of my grandparents and their grandparents and my parents. I'm staring down the barrel of a heart attack, I'm sure, and some strokes. I regularly contribute to Heart and Stroke Association because it's too heavy on my sides not to have an effect. So, knowing that, you're like, okay, so how do I kind of prevent that? Well, I've never smoked. I do drink. I'm trying to curb that post-COVID also. Trying to be healthy. But again, who better to come up with every excuse in the book not to exercise? It will be your ER nurse who goes, well, I run around like a chicken with my head cut off for 12-ish hours, roughly, depending, anywhere from 2 to 4 times a week. And so you're like, does that count? I feel like that counts. I'm like, let's check the Fitbit. So like Fitbit, I'm sure, is like, what in the world is going on? She's doing like 12,000 steps one day and like constant heart elevation.
Yeah.
And then another day, like not even 1,000 steps. And like, I'm sure Fitbit, like, there's got to be something wrong with the machine. I don't understand what's going on.
This is going to lead up to the first AI nervous breakdown is what we're talking
about. Somebody once said, or I've seen it a couple of times, where somebody has kind of compared those of us who grew up in the 80s and 90s, and we had Tamagotchis, and it was, that little teeny tiny egg that everybody carried around, and it beeped at you when you needed to feed it or change it or do whatever. And so we grew up with these like little Tamagotchis attached to us. And now the joke is, you're the Tamagotchi, right? You're supposed to be looking after yourself and having regular checkups and going to the dentist and making sure that you don't have any gum disease and, all these other preventative things. You're supposed to adult, and during COVID, a lot of us were just like, whatever, we're just throwing in the towel at home kind of thing. As long as we can get through the shift, nobody called in sick. unless you actually, theoretically had COVID symptoms. We all saved up our sick time because we didn't know if we would end up on a ventilator and need that sick time. So, nobody came in for overtime.
You're describing triaging your own life.
Oh, 100%. I literally, just even today, there was an ADHD content creator who a couple of years ago came out with the task triage. And it's just like a little list, and it's, red, yellow, green, how urgent is this task, and when do you need to do it by? And I, honest to goodness, just today made myself a pad of these, and it's being shipped to me later. So, because I've got so much going on that I'm just like, okay, like we need to triage something. But funny enough, not once did I say, get out and exercise. Not once where I was like, oh, let me meal plan a healthy meal. Not once where I was like, oh, I really need to increase my water intake. Nothing like that.
But it makes sense to me. It makes total sense to me, because what the lifestyle you're describing is not conducive to that mindset. Yeah. I mean, you're kind of asking your mind to do something that goes completely against what it experiences 24 hours a day.
Yeah.
That's I don't know anybody who knows how to do that.
It's just the immediate needs. And again, this is the ER to a T. We put Band-Aids on big problems. The ICU, the CCU, the med surge units, those are for the small Band-Aids. We're not planning care 3, 4, 5 days in advance. We're not, there are a lot of things that matter a ton in ICU and med surge, where the ER is just like, you want me to keep track of ins and outs? No. Like, where they peed, it was fine. No, I did not measure it. No, I don't know when they had their last bowel movement. Like, do they have any, the ongoing joke is, do they have any, how's their skin? Is their skin intact? Do they have any wounds? Do they have, especially on your buttocks, the coccyx ulcers from sitting in bed in one spot too long, you get bed sores. So the joke is people wait and emerge, especially in Canada, anywhere from 60 to 120 hours this week for a bed on the floor. And in the meantime, you're sitting on an ER stretcher, which is not the most comfortable thing. They've tried and they've upgraded the mattresses lately, but it's still not great. So, the joke is the ICU or med surge, well, how's their skin? I'm like, I don't know. They've got it.
They've got it. Yeah.
That's
when you start getting to the macabre humor, what kind of lifestyle you're living.
So dark. We got so dark so quick. And it's the same, this is why paramedicine, police, fire, nursing, we all find each other. If there's one more nurse or like frontline worker who deals with people, even retail, sometimes the retail people, they're doing the same thing we are. It's just they don't have to wipe anything. They're dealing with people who are stressed out and anxious and over the top and don't know what's going on. They're just usually behind a counter, at the very least. You hope that they're behind a counter, but they're dealing with the same sort of abuse. So it's like,
so, I mean, look, I'm going to go out on a limb here, but your book that's coming out in 6 or 7 weeks, it's nursing intuitive. Is that it?
Nursing intuition, how to save your.
But really, that's not aimed at the broad nursing spectrum, is it? It's aimed particularly at people who are in the realm that you're in, dealing with the emergency situations, dealing with the high stress stuff.
So, dealing with it, it's actually for all nurses. Any nurse, and actually any person has got intuition. It's just the key is whether or not you choose to kind of lean into it and deal with it or not. So the studies and peer-reviewed evidence-based studies, this is why I feel actually comfortable kind of bringing this forward, is it's now backed by science. So if it's backed by science, I can bring it forward now. The science says that it's usually those nurses in critical care, so ER, ICU, those kind of departments where life-saving decisions are being made on a minutely basis in some scenarios. And so when you have this feeling of intuition, or you have this feeling that something's not going right, that the patient's not doing well, you act on it. You listen to it and you act on it. Whereas the floors, you have the minute to talk yourself out of it. Oh, I'm just being, I don't know what I'm talking about. I'm new. I don't know. And they don't bring it forward. They don't bring it up, and they don't bring it to their docs. So I'm in hopes of bringing this past just a 3 a.m. conversation when we're all joking about, ghost stories and trusting your gut and this kind of thing. I'm hoping to bring it forward a little bit and bring it out of the shadows and let people know that, we have intuition. It is backed by science. We can start talking about it openly.
Which is good. I'm glad you're doing that.
Day shift during the week, we can talk about this.
Mhm.
Because the more senior nurses, when I start talking about this, they say, oh, well, yeah, I've been doing that for years. And it's like, well, yeah, of course you've been doing it for years. You're very experienced. You know what you're doing. And you've trusted it, and it's paid off enough times where you go, I just don't know. And you've asked the doc, and there's been an intervention which actually improves patient outcomes, that you then lean back into it and you trust it and you go. And with every time you trust it and you get a little bit of validation, you lean into it harder, and then you get more validation. And it's just this lovely little staircase to, better patient outcomes and a little bit more resilience when it comes to, I do know what I'm doing. I am advocating for my patient, and hopefully not only getting better patient outcomes, but then hopefully avoiding really catastrophic incidences that then impacts the nurse and potentially could end careers mental health wise.
But I mean, when you say that this applies to all nursing, and what I also take into account, like, nurse practitioners or
Yeah.
nurses in a clinic,
Yeah.
working with a doctor and just seeing regular patients and so forth, which isn't really the same kind of minute by minute decision making you're talking about.
It's not, but sometimes, patients don't know sometimes how sick they are. So sometimes these really sick patients, heaven bless them, they're going to their family doctors. They've waited weeks to get into their family doctor for chest pain or heaviness or some shortness of breath or
Which,
something
by the way,
like
they're
that.
encouraged to do that. That's the way the system
That is
structured
the
because that's
encouragement,
where you're
right?
supposed to
Like
go.
if you feel well enough to wait, or it's been going on for quite some time, like, please, yeah, follow up with your family doctor, walk in clinic, urgent care. There are steps way before the ER. But a lot of these nurse practitioners, they were nurses first. They were working the floors first. You have to, so in Canada, at least, you're usually supposed to have 2 years of practice before you can even apply to become a nurse practitioner and like get into the nurse practitioner school. So, we've all got that background behind us. And, the number of people who come in and they're just saying some things and they just don't look great, and they've waited and they've waited and they've waited. And now all of a sudden, now it's an emergency. Now it's changing things. Sometimes it's really big things where, you've got fluid buildup in your lungs, and now we need to do some drastic interventions to kind of help you pass that. Otherwise, it's identifying things just that much earlier so that we don't get to that point of having to use the ER or being that sick to have to use the ER.
Does
So,
the intuition also play a role, though, in non-emergency situations?
oh yeah, because so usually more so it will play into the socioeconomic things, the other factors. So when someone's not really worrying about their immediate health, then you're getting more information about, like, how are you coping at home? How's your mental health? Are you taking care of a loved one? Are you needing respite? Are you in a violent situation at home? That's when you can kind of pick up more on these stories where it may not be the emergency medical, but it could be an emergency emotional. So there's so much that, if you trust your gut and you think something's off, more often than not, you're right. You just have to figure out what it is that's off.
So, from your perspective, is the importance of trusting your gut, which is really what this intuition is all about, is the importance of trusting your gut something that it's a message that everybody has to learn to believe is okay, or is it something that they already know it's okay, but they have to learn how to do it, or is it something where they have to kind of break through on, well, this stuff actually works. This stuff's viable. It's not something.
Real.
It's real.
It's not
backed by
witchcraft.
science, as you said.
It's science. So this is why I harp on the science end of it, is because it very much feels like a woo-woo conversation. It's a very woo
Which
topic
we're used to
where,
around here, by the way, just saying,
sorry,
which we're used to. We're used to the woo conversations. That's
we're
normal around here,
so some of
but
us
it's
are
not
very
normal
used.
everywhere else. So, I mean, certainly not normal in the emergency room,
No,
No.
but where else can you deal with life and death on the daily and not come away with there's a little bit more to this than just what I'm seeing right in front of me? There's got to
Mhm.
be more. And especially with experience, with time, and with trust, you start to pick up more on these things. So um it's one of those things where everybody's got it. It's just a matter of not just, well, acknowledging it for one. So something comes up and you're just like, oh, why do I feel like that? Why do I not like how this situation is playing out? Like, what is it about? Is it how they look? Is it how they're acting? Is it how they're behaving? Is it how they're breathing? Like, is it something that I can physically see and assess? Or am I just getting, so again, the kids, am I just getting the vibe that something is off? Like,
Yeah.
there's way more to the scenario than I'm realizing or that I'm being privy to. So let's try and figure this out.
It's basically saying something's incongruent. I just don't know necessarily what it is. So what is
Yeah.
it?
Yeah. And getting it to be an open topic where we can actually talk about this. Because my docs, and most of the docs I've worked with, when I come to them and say, hey, something's wrong. I don't know what it is. Their vitals might be fine. Things might be on the semi right track, but there's something going on with this. And the good docs will listen. They will stop what they're doing. They will come and see your patient. And again, you want to go back to science. If nothing else, if you're wrong, or maybe you're just newer and you're overreacting and you're just a little bit extra sensitive to what sick looks like, just the doc coming in and looking still improves your patient outcome. So why not really just go for it? Dive in with both feet and get some validation and get some work behind you, and really just get bounce it off anybody who's been there greater than 15 years. Bounce it off them. Be like, do you know what? Like, do you trust your gut? What do you, or even just listen to your colleagues. So if everybody's sitting at the nursing station and you hear a colleague talk to a doc, be like, hey, I don't like how this is going. Pick up on that. That is somebody saying, I don't like how this is going. I'm using my intuition. I don't know how to say it or talk about it without sounding like I'm nuts. But this is what I'm bringing forward. And, there's been so many times that I've done it. So if I've done it, I can't imagine how many times other people are doing it and just not getting that validation for themselves that they're doing it.
It sounds like one of your main messages is this is nuts.
No, it's not nuts.
Let's just reject this whole idea that when someone has an intuition that it's nuts. Let's just leave that one at the door because it's not helping us.
No, trust your gut. Do all the things, if you're wrong, yes, you risk that you're wrong. But regardless, you're still learning. You're still learning to use your voice. You're still advocating for your patients. You're still starting to really step into a sweet, confident nurse who is concerned about their patients and their well-being. So what if you're a little overactive? Big deal. Guess what? One of these times you are going to catch it before it goes into, hitting the wall and going nuts. So
and oh, by the way, it just also happens to be a part of the scientific method.
It's science. We can teach it because, there was just one teacher in university who said one time, trust your gut. And thank God she did, because I don't know if I would have been able to recognize that was what was happening and really give into it without having that message already been given to me years prior.
Which is really odd to me. And the reason I say it's odd is that when you look at what the actual scientific method is essentially create a theory, look for some evidence, get the evidence, evaluate it, create the next version of the theory, go get some evidence, evaluate it, go get the next version of the theory. Well, in order to get the next version of the theory, you very often have to rely on, ready for it, drum roll please, intuition. Yeah. You have to go with what your gut is telling you is the next thing you have to do. It's part of the scientific method.
Listen, ask a cop. How do you know who to trust and who not to?
Yeah.
How do you know who's lying and who's not? It's not being presented to you any other way. Right. If you're just taking it at face value, you're interrogating somebody. That's it. they're telling you XYZ, and why don't you believe them?
Mm.
So it's everywhere. It's
It is.
absolutely everywhere. If you are dealing with people on a regular basis, you have intuition, that you're probably getting more hits than you realize.
So
So
not to take readers away from your book, but your book is basically about this is normal.
yes,
This
and
is
here's all
not
my
this
stories.
is not extreme. There's nothing
No,
unusual. There's nothing crazy here. There's
no.
nothing wrong. This is normal behavior for a
This,
medical professional.
but I'm putting it all out there to be the one to say it, because the more people I talk to, especially even like LinkedIn and professionals, like professional nurses, masters, PhDs, all these people, the more I talk to people, they're like, well, yeah. And I'm like, that's what I'm saying. Like, that's all I want. Why is it such a, well, yeah, we can.
Why is it like pulling teeth to get that statement?
Because people are petrified to say yes to it, and to say out loud to other medical professionals and to other academics that yes, this is a thing, because they're afraid of being labeled crazy. Listen, I'm out here, I'm out proud, I'm super crazy, I'm putting it out there, take it or leave it, but there's science to back me up.
This is really important stuff. And the reason I say this is important stuff is mainstream medicine has locked itself into a straitjacket and has been in that straitjacket for years, and insists on staying there, and insists that everyone else worship them for being in that straitjacket.
Yeah.
And what they don't seem to grasp is that straitjacket is preventing them from developing medicine.
And leaning into things. Like, maybe you had a thought of like, oh, well, what if you put this medicine mixed with that medicine? Like, I wonder if it would work some other way on this. But because it was just like a flighty thought, you gave it no heed, and you just no, that's not. Where did that come from? That makes no sense. There's no science to back that up.
I mean, I look at, the main thrust of modern medicine, it's what we'll call the pharmaceutical approach to healing, right? It's all pharmaceutical, like millions and millions of drugs that have been created, and they've been double blind tested, blah, 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 blah. And 3/4 of them all do the same thing. I mean, it's not a whole lot of variance that goes on. There is some, don't get me wrong. When you get a million different drugs, there's going to be variance going on. But when you look at it from the broad spectrum, you say, there's not a lot going on here. They're all going after the same things with the same minimal level of results. And at some point, you have to ask yourself, like, in what way is our system that we're doing this holding us back from finding better ways of treating things, from finding better ways of doing things? That's what I think is the biggest thing that you're doing. You're finding a way to break through that mindset that says, no, we have to stay tied into this one little, very tightly organized circle of things. Otherwise, all chaos is going to go loose, and Pandora's box is going to be open, and the whole thing's going to go to crisis and chaos.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, let it.
That's
what I'm used to. So I thrive in crisis and chaos. So bring it on. I anticipate I will be torn to shreds by those who just absolutely cannot give in to this idea that there's, this works. Kudos to you. That is your opinion. Absolutely. I'm going to still get on my soapbox over here, because I know better. I mean, I don't know better. That's super condescending, but like,
it's not more
I know what I can do.
Let's be honest, their viewpoint's very condescending.
Yeah.
It really is. This is the only way to do medicine. As soon as you include the words only in a sentence, you've basically just shown yourself to be, excuse me, a lunatic. You really are.
Yeah. It is what it is. So I'm just putting it out there. Those who need to hear the message will hear it. Those who aren't ready to hear it won't. That's okay. But the book will be there, hopefully 50 to 100 years from now. And maybe it'll be that one piece that really gets the ball rolling. Do I think it will be? Maybe, maybe not. I mean, I would love to think that it is. But do I expect it to be? No. But hoping, swinging for the fences. I'm hoping it just starts a really good conversation.
Yeah. Regardless of whether it does or not, what I do know is this: when you put stuff out there, particularly stuff that goes against the grain, that goes against what the norm says to do, and when you put the stuff out anyway, like you told me before we got going, even if it only positively affects one other person, you succeeded.
Yeah.
So yeah, maybe it does go viral, maybe it doesn't go viral. as long as they help that one person, does it really matter?
Viral dies off. Viral's not a mainstay kind of thing. There's only
Not
a
really,
couple
no.
things that go viral that maybe you remember in your 40s and 50s and go, oh yeah, you'll remember that. But no, like the slow, steady, just gonna keep on nursing. Just keep nursing, and it's just hopefully going to be there to support people who are ready for that message.
It reminds me of something that I make it a practice to do here on the show. I'm going to do it a few minutes earlier. We have about 10 minutes left, and I normally do this with about 2 or 3 minutes left in the show, but I'm going to do it now because it really does fit in perfectly. When someone comes onto the show, inevitably it's because they've been through something on their own, usually some sort of a trauma, some sort of horrible event. In your case, it was depressions that you went through, and they came out the other side and they learned something from it. And that's something they said, wow, other people got to know this.
Yeah.
And so they write a book, they create a course, they do something to help get the word out, and they go on to podcasts, and they go onto social media, and they write blogs, and they do all this stuff in order to get the word out every which way that they possibly can. Very often creating a lot of free content along the way. They're creating the YouTube videos and all this other stuff, right?
Oh, yeah.
That's just part of what you're doing. And as a result, we've got this massive collection in a very short period of time technologically. We've got this massive collection of data that's been created by people giving all this free content out there. And then I noticed something about that content a couple of years ago. I noticed that we don't get credit for it.
Yeah.
Which is really an interesting and odd thing. And then I also realized, well, I'm a podcast host, so I can do something about that. So, Jen, on behalf of those people you've never met, you've never seen, never will meet, never will see, who are receiving that content, who are getting benefit from that content in ways that you don't even know about, on their behalf, thank you for what you're doing, because you're making a difference in this world.
Make me bawl, why don't you? Yeah, it's just, life's funny, and I'm just one more weird kid who just is finding their way. So I'm just hoping to do what I can just to help. And it's not even, creating change, this, that, and the other. Just, if I can just help one more person get through a day.
But that is change. That is change. That is the definition of change.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's the funny thing about this kind of change. It is small at first. If you have that one person that you affected, the ripple effect is the part that fascinates me, because we can't ever track it. Well, not ever, occasionally.
Not usually.
But most often we can't track it at all. And yet we see the effects of these ripples all over the place.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't take a lot of observation to go look around the world and see ripples that have happened in all fields, in all aspects of human life, and then wonder, where the heck did they all come from? Well, they came from people doing little things like this.
Just the weird things, just living their super kooky little weird lives.
And they're the ones that actually make the biggest changes happen. We can't, just because we can't see how it all connects together doesn't mean it doesn't happen. It just means we can't see it.
Exactly.
That's all. Yeah.
That's it.
So yeah, I think it's really valuable what you're doing.
Thank you.
A couple things I need to ask you though. First, for somebody who wants to reach out to you, how do they find out how to reach you? Because I mean, they're probably, you mentioned it yourself. You have a shoulder to cry on. You have a to talk to. Well, they got to be able to find you in order to do this.
So TikTok and Instagram, I'm at ergen or ernurse.jen, JENN. I'm on LinkedIn, Jennifer Johnson, BSCNRN, only because there's a bazillion Jennifer Johnsons. My website is RX for Growth, so prescriptionforgrowth.com. I'm going to be at Nurse Blake in a couple of weeks. I'm going to be at Health with Nurse Approved and Audience Link, trying to talk to the CEOs and trying to bring it to them about, you need to start at square one and support your nurses the second they enter your building in orientation.
Wow. Really good. Yeah. That's going to affect more than one person. I'm
just hoping.
Oh yeah, it will. There's no doubt in my mind about that. So that's the first thing. We haven't really talked much about the book. That's what I want to spend like the last 2 or 3 minutes on.
Yeah.
Talk about what we know, what motivated the book, but what were you trying to convey? What was the message you were trying to convey? What you were trying to say here on the show? Was there more to it that we kind of skipped over? Is there something that maybe we need to bring in that we hadn't brought in?
So really, it started out as a trauma journal, and it morphed into the intuition being brought into it. You know, so the first kind of third of the book is a little bit more academic. You know, what is intuition? How do we use it? What does it feel like? But it's a lot of my stories, and it's my stories of, you know, this is how I used intuition. Here's all my bullying stories. This is how I got through my bullying stories. Here's a thing about COVID. Here's some rituals that I do when somebody dies. My ER pump up playlist that I put on every day before going into work to try and pump myself up. It's a variable mishmash of a ton of stuff, but there's also some journal prompts in there for getting you thinking about, like, when was your last win? What happened? Was it your win? Was it somebody else's win that you helped in? You know, when was the last time you got a full 8 hours of sleep that was uninterrupted? When was the last time you went outside barefoot and stood in the grass and just took a moment to do nothing else but stand in the grass? So
I love this. A nurse who's advocating grounding. I can't remember the last time I heard that.
I wasn't going to use grounding, but like, listen, let's go full on shadow work. Like, let's pull out that trauma. Let's talk about the trauma. Let's talk about it, because we deal with so much that we don't talk about. And it's time, in order for us to survive what we're doing, we need and move forward and grow. And set a lot of boundaries. We're going to have to dig deep into why we've gotten into this tight little spot in the first place.
I think that's the last thought that I want to hit before we finish up here, because you used a very important word, survival. If there's going to be survival here, I think that's prescient. And the reason I think that's prescient is I think we're going through a period of time where not just medicine, but, you know, practically every field that you can think of is going through a crumbling era. Like there is a lot of crumbling going. You know, institutions are crumbling. They're kind of falling apart. They're deteriorating in front of our eyes, and they're doing it at a pace that far exceeds anything that happened in the past. So we're watching it almost in real time, right? So,
it's insane.
Well, it is. It's definitely a thing. And in order to get through dealing with that thing, we also have to be able to know, well, what's it going to look like on the other side? How do we get to that other side? That's the survival part that you're talking about.
Yeah.
So that to me is actually a pretty important piece.
We're getting there. One day, hopefully we'll get there.
Well, I think you're getting there right now. I think that's what the whole point is. And I love the fact that you built your book around stories. I mean, first of all, what human doesn't like stories? Even medical professionals, everybody loves stories.
Everybody loves a good story, and everybody always asks you, you know, what's your best story? And
what's
it's
your
like,
best story?
What do you want? Do you want me to completely wreck your day, or do you want me to talk about the time
how dark do you want to get?
How dark do you want to go? How fast? Or are you just looking for a funny, haha, somebody stuck something up somewhere where they shouldn't have story, which is normally what most people who aren't medical want.
Which is actually healthy.
Yeah.
It's very healthy.
Honestly, just say what it is and how long it's been up there. We've seen it all before. We get it. It's human nature.
This is true. Jen, thanks so much for joining me today. I really appreciate
thank you so much.
And best of luck with the book when it comes out. Do you know what the release date is?
October 29th, and it's up on Amazon right now for pre-order.
Okay. So people can get the pre-order in right now.
Yeah.
Very good. All right. Well, congratulations on the release. Best of luck with it. And thank you for joining us.
Thanks.
And thank you to our podcast listeners everywhere. We'll see you all next time here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.